let me introduce the speakers and the discussant first, and let me briefly explain the format of the session 3. In session 3, we'll have the 4 presentations. Professor Jae-Seung Lee from Korea University there, and the second paper by Professor Paul Paziebiak and Professor Thomas Bialos here, and the third one by Professor Sewon Jung, and yet he's staying there, and the last one by Dr. Jang Young-wook. Okay, and again, the burden of discussing all the papers that will be done by Professor Hyul Chai. He is sitting there. Since we are given 2 hours and we have four papers, I'd like to give each speaker around 20 minutes. So if you spend the whole 20 minutes, I'll give this 2-minute notice. Then you should finish the remaining within two minutes. And since the Professor Hyul Chai should discuss the 4 papers, I'd like to give him a little more minutes, the 15 minutes. Then, so after 4 presentations and after the designated discussion, I think we can have around 30 minutes. We can have around 15 minutes. Then, since we can exchange discussions in the last panel session before inviting the response from the speakers, I will collect maybe a couple of the comments and questions from the floor. So that means the speakers, you can respond, briefly respond to the comments and questions from the discussant and from the floor, maybe roughly 2 minutes for each speaker. So let's, please welcome Professor Jae-Seung Lee with some applause.
All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and my name is Jae-Seung Lee from Korea University, and once again, I'm very happy to be here, and our project during past 3 years. Well, we've been through a lot of unexpected pandemic and other obstacles, but just really glad that we are getting together here again in Brussels. Okay, my topic is energy connectivity between EU and Northeast Asia and implication from the Ukrainian crisis. Actually, I worked on the paper, the academic outcome with the same title but with a different subtitle, because the paper I submitted to Asia Europe Journal, our first project, was the common path toward low carbon development. So that was written in the BC era, means before Corona era, and at that time, actually, the mood was quite optimistic about the low carbon collaboration between EU and Northeast Asia, even including China. But 2 factors have affected. First factor is that the U.S.-China competition got strengthened, and EU-China relation, especially in recent years, got deteriorated. Korea-China relation also in a similar pattern. So the China factor made one difference, and probably the biggest factor that changed a lot of landscape would be the Russian invasion of Ukraine in recent years. So I think I have already circulated my earlier version, and we will eventually get the publication from Asia Europe Journal. So today I changed the content a little bit and updated the information. So this one is not showing what I have done in about an year and a half ago, but actually this is what I'm observing and working on nowadays. So this is kind of the next step, but hope I can link my earlier work and our earlier discussion in the morning on the sustainability, the connectivity and sustainability. So hope we can get the common ground. All right, the Russo-Ukrainian war actually affected the Asia-Europe connectivity, and certainly we can see some possible the impact. Direct impact will be the actual military operation and security issues, and also the direct trade issues. But indirect issues are not less important, because the indirect effect are actually spreading out all over the world, in which both Europe and Asian countries are being affected. So for example, higher commodity price, definitely, and higher energy price, and we actually talked about the agricultural products and other the supply chain disruption issues, and deteriorating economic outlook, including high inflation pressure. So these indirect effects are, and regarding this indirect effect, Northeast Asia and especially Korea would not be the exception. So we are definitely in a common boat. So we have seen some black swan, unexpected war, but many of these issues, energy issues and these economic issues, been already expected. But the thing is, the COVID-19, well, it's good to see that the COVID-19 pandemic is heading toward the exit nowadays, and we can actually fly, and the air travel became possible. So certainly good, but it also means that energy demand, energy consumption will go higher and will go back to the previous stage. But the thing is, during the pandemic period, energy investment, especially in the production side, got substantially shrinked. That means there has been a pressure for higher energy prices, but that was coupled with the supply chain disruption and the war in Ukraine and uncertainties of the Russian Russian gas and oil supply added a lot more weight. That means we are at this moment in a perfect storm situation, in which high energy price, high inflation, and high uncertainties in forthcoming picture. So energy crisis is not just a European phenomena. And yes, I just mentioned the uncertainty of Russian oil and gas supply. OPEC plus Middle East and Russia plus the United States, as the discussion, will that be coordinated, especially in the aftermath of the Ukrainian war? That is becoming another issue. Increased demand. Iranian nuclear deal is still unclear, and whether it might be too early to tell whether Iranian oil and gas will come into the market, and we are seeing very strong inflationary pressure. The United States, the U.S. Federal Reserve recently began to introduce the big step and giant step and the further steps. So it's a very high tempoed waltz from the Federal to the U.S. Fed side, but actually that affected the global economy. So global supply chain disruption, and plus in many European countries, especially in northern side experienced the instability of renewable energy supply, especially the wind energy. The wind stopped, and that became a major issue. So, and Russian invasion of Ukraine, basically it aggravated all these factors. So, the energy crisis, this is electricity price and natural gas price. I guess many of the European participants will share this idea, but actually the figures do not make a lot of difference. So yes, certainly pipeline, the supply of oil and gas are in danger, and already we are seeing substantially decreased amount of supply or announced the reduction from the Russian side. So how the energy crisis will affect both Europe and Asia? For example, the Russian natural gas export actually targeted U.S. market, European market. This part was relatively minor, but European market and Asian market were intertwined with the Russian gas export, and recently with LNG. But nowadays, in a good sense, these two buyers are in the same boat. Okay, both Asian market and European markets are affected by a very uncertain Russian natural gas export, and this U.S. LNG. Regarding both Europe and Asian countries used to buy U.S. LNG, and many U.S. LNG tankers that were supposed to go to Asian countries, Korea and Japan, actually changed their route to Europe. So, so far that did not affect the Asian market that much. But how long? How long both Europe and Asia can share U.S. LNG, at least temporarily, peacefully? And to what extent the United States can be a stable alternative supplier of LNG? So that will be an issue. So, we have seen, at the beginning of COVID-19, the oil price was really, it had a minus shock, but nowadays it is reaching, and in a sense, it's reaching 2008, the historical high point, high record period. The gas market has been quite stable during past decade, since the U.S. oil, the shale gas and oil boom, but nowadays gas market no longer reliable. And what will be the message both to Europe and Korea? Because low and stable gas price may not be expectable in the forthcoming years. Then what will be the alternative? Gas is relatively low carbon fossil fuel. So it worked as a good alternative to coal, at least, and it was competing with renewable energy. And also it became an alternative to nuclear energy. But nowadays we do have a quite different picture. Impact on Korea. This is Korean gasoline price, and it is actually went up in recent data. So yes, Korean gasoline price is constantly in upward pressure. And this is the inflationary pressure. But I'm wondering where, well, and this is oil, but somewhat different kind of oil, palm oil. This is for eating and cooking. So why all of a sudden palm oil here? Well, as you know, Korean people work very hard. We work 10 hours, 11 hours, 12 hours per day sometimes. And we get stressed. So at night, we have to get rid of those stresses. How? We can watch TVs and we can watch the Netflix and we have to eat something. We have to eat something. Usually the best, most popular item would be beer and chicken. Chicken and beer, beer and chicken. What we call the chimek. Okay, chicken, fried chicken. You need lots of cooking oil. But actually something happened. Perfect storm happened in the cooking oil market. Two things. Indonesia stopped the export of palm oil, the cooking oil. Well, they have some domestic shortage issues. Second, Ukraine had a lot of sunflower seed, and they made nice cooking oils out of sunflower seed, but those export market were stopped. So it had a chain effect. So nowadays, not just flowers and other agricultural products, but actually cooking oil is a big issue. So what happened? Chicken became very expensive. We are still eating it, but somehow hesitating for a few more minutes at night before pressing the button for delivery. But do I have to pay more than like 20 euros for this tiny bird-sized chicken? So, but anyway, that affects the inflation, price, commodity price, and people's life here. Sino-Russian coupling, possibly, very possibly. Russia's biggest export destination used to be China, and China-Russian economic ties during past few years been strengthening. But with the U.S. and European sanction on Russia, China and Russian coupling and economic ties will get strengthened, including oil and gas supply side. Russia does need an alternative market, and China will probably fill the gap. And certainly, a lot of minus growth or very quick slowdown of the world economy that we are witnessing. So, to what extent we can tolerate and wait for the recovery, while saying that this is the price we should pay for the freedom. Okay, we have to stand together with Ukraine, and this is a pain, but this pain is the price for freedom. Yes, certainly that works. My question is, for how long? For how long European countries and the world economy will bear and will keep the line solid? Supply chains are nowadays being disrupted. Many commodities are being influenced, but one of the major items would be the rare earth material that would be used in the batteries and other high-tech material. Nowadays, also semiconductor supply is nowadays seriously in trouble. So once you to pick up a new car, sometimes you have to wait for 6 months, 8 months, or over a year. Okay, and the main problem is the battery and semiconductor business. So, well, previously China factors been the major issue, but nowadays Russian factors were added to the China factor. So we have had a tightly organized supply chains, but we have to think about the pattern of supply chain without both China and Russia, and that will mean quite something in this kind of the rare earth material. Impact on the food market, yes, the threat of agflation, the agricultural product, is a began to, well, their price shift is quite astonishing, and it does affect the everyday life of many the other people, and especially lower or mid to lower strata of the society. So going back to my earlier work on the energy transition side, so will that be the positive sign for the renewable, sustainable growth oriented the cooperation between Asia and Europe? I would say partially yes, but but that would be the long term the consequence. In the short run, we have to bear the huge challenge of energy supply. So at least we are sharing, but both sides are sharing the principle of low carbonization and decarbonization. But the methodology, what's the modality of decarbonization? Now the solution is becoming a little bit different, and more countries begin to talk about nuclear as an option, nuclear as a possible option of reducing CO2. Impact on China is interesting, but I may skip it and may go back to the Q&A session. I will have another slide to show you. So East Asia, going back, well, focusing on Northeast Asian side. Energy security nowadays is one of the key word. So the war factors were added to the existing geopolitical competition between US and China versus other East Asian countries. And the Indo-Pacific strategy, and Indo-Pacific economic framework. Nowadays, that is becoming a new economic governance in the region, and Korea is slowly moving to this part. United States is very strong in mobilizing the alliance among the techno-democracies, the like-minded countries. And the major resources are being securitized. So energy, food, semiconductor, rare earth material. Nowadays, we are talking about the security of supply of those issues. And the thing is, at this moment, it is very hard to find the middle ground. We will stand somewhere, in between US and China is becoming tough and tough. So, yes, these are the tasks for Korea. We should build the energy resilience against geopolitical instability, and building supply chain at the pan-alliance level meaning US, Europe, and Japan and other Asian countries. And also, we have to get ready for the prolongation of the Russian sanction. Last page. So we have to rethink about connectivity and some new opportunities. Of course, I can figure out a lot more challenging factors, but if we are still working on the cooperation side, on connectivity, then first mission will be connectivity in resilient energy security, including both oil and gas and renewable, and resilient energy mix, and very flexible and resilient energy mix using renewables and nuclear too. Second one is connectivity in sustainable energy transition, so low carbon measure, green development aid to developing countries. These are all the items the Europe and Northeast Asian countries have shared and will share more in the future. Last one, connectivity in energy dialogue. Okay, so Europe and Northeast Asian countries, especially, or East Asian countries, need to galvanize more policy or business level dialogue on the energy transition and energy connectivities, and also the collaboration at the multilateral level will be an option. And this part will link the recent study and my earlier publication for our SPEAC project. So I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor Lee. Now, Professor Pajobiak and Professor Bialowas, you also have 20 minutes.
set my clock so. Okay, so first of all, of course, I would like to thank all participants of that conference, and in particular to my real sincere thanks goes to Professor Sung-Hoon Park, and thank you for inviting us for having this opportunity and participating in that great project. Yeah, and I will present on behalf of me, myself, and Professor Tomasz Białowąs the topic you see here. So it will be more specific a little bit because we wanted to think about trade and investment policies and how it influences the EU-Asia connectivity. So shortly I show you the outline of my presentation, so it will be a few words of introduction. Then I'll talk a little bit about trade and investment flows between two parties, then trade investment policy, and then the part that will be based on some calculations we made for the paper, potential effects of liberalization, and some conclusions of that. Yeah, maybe it's trivial, but it's worth underlining that Asia and Europe are main economic centers of the world economy, and if they are combined together, they account for around 60% of GDP, almost 75% of exports, and around 60% of accumulated investment outflows. So they are important for the global economy, but also they are important for each other. So whatever happens between these economies, it has consequences not only for those Asian and European partners, but also for the world economy. And as said, these both sides are important for each other. If we take into account the trade, Europe depends very much on Asia, and especially on the import sides. We import more than 50% of our external trade goods, merchandise trade from Asia. A little bit less we export to Asia. But also it works in an opposite way. So for Asia, we are quite important market with 1/3 of entire importation and exportation. So if we add also some investment and production ties, we are very much interdependent. So creation of favorable environment for cooperation can mean that the situation will be better or not. It depends on that environment. So the connectivity comes here. So connectivity plays an important role in that sense that if it is about bringing countries, people, and societies together, it influences development of economies. So we can kind of easily find a connection between connectivity and economic growth, but also like more fierce competition and also increased investment and trade. It will have some consequences for both partners and the world. And yes, in 2018, the European Commission presented some elements of the strategy of developing connectivity with Asia. So it confirmed actually approach that was taken in the mid of 90s, actually. As a result of those activities undertaken, it was possible to observe that the changes taking place in trade and investment between the European Union and Asia. So we it doesn't work. Maybe if you can just. Okay. Yeah. So we decided to research on that. So the main goal of the research is to analyze development of trade and investment in the period. Actually, the period is period dependent on data availability. So it's mainly in 2019, but it can be like wider and also narrower a little bit in the condition of trade and investment policy development. So we analyze the trade and investment flows, as said, and potential effects of entry into force of trade and investment agreements. Okay, and we decided to state like two hypotheses, and the first one, that possibilities of getting benefits from liberalization of trade and some investment liberalization activities is dependent on three main factors. So first, it is the degree of current trade protection, then similarities in export structures, and also degree of integration within global value chains. And the second one says that trade liberalization, that the most significant benefits can be obtained by countries where the current level of protection is high. The highest, where the similarity of export structure is the lowest, and where the share of foreign value in export is the highest. And then we used some research methods, and we analyzed the situation, taking into account like the trade policy, which is based on the custom duties and also non-tariff measures. Then we compared some export structures based on RCA, revealed comparative advantage indicator that was calculated, and then we used also some information about global value chains for European Union and some selected Asian countries. Okay, and the chart I would like to show you is the chart with trade. And we covered the the years from the middle of 90s. So it was the beginning of a change, or like changing in thinking about the policy toward cooperation with Asia by European Union, by European part. So we can observe some increase in trade here, both on export but also import side. It was uneven, of course, and there were some factors influencing the situation. But nevertheless, our trade deficit, from the point of view of European Union, just increased. So the situation from our point of view is rather negative. And as for 2020, we had almost 400 billion of US dollars of deficit. So it's quite a bit, although it was not the record, as you can see in the 2008 it was a little bit higher. But the comparison of average exports and imports of European Union with the export and import with Asian partners shows that we are more and more dependent or interdependent with Asia. As for investment part, the situation looks a little bit different, and we had some difficulties with finding good data, but finally we found some data in European databases. So we can observe that our as European investments are bigger than Asian investment in Europe. More stable Asian investment in Europe, and more volatile investment in Asia, European investment in Asia. We could go and elaborate a little bit about that, because these investments are geographically concentrated. As for investment areas, also they are dominated by certain countries only. Okay, but it was to show you that from economic point of view we are more and more dependent. And now let's go to this policy area where we can show that European Union is more and more active in shaping the relations or creating the framework for cooperation. And it started more or less in 1994 with a new Asian strategy. By that time, the situation looked like it was kind of a rivalry with Japan and maybe newly industrialized countries like also South Korea. Maybe some aid from European Union to developing Asian countries, and maybe some attempts to create the agreement with ASEAN grouping. But it changed in the mid of 90s, because Asia was more and more important. Like the potential of Asia was growing, and firstly the individual countries noticed that change, and then European Union as a whole also started to perceive that the region as a very important and key region actually. So we had a situation where more and more documents were introduced actually. So if we look at those documents, they are like evolved from the more general approach toward more individual approach, and some Asian countries were also explicitly introduced in these agreements. So we could observe that the change from a more global towards a more individual approach in certain countries. This is confirmed by the table that gathers information about trade and investment agreements. Of course, I won't read it, but we have, and it was already stated today, we have 4 agreements in force with Korea, Japan, Singapore, and Vietnam. We have some problems with investment agreements, actually. It's much harder. Also, it was mentioned that we negotiated, and it is in the phase of approving on the Europe side with Singapore and Vietnam, but actually it doesn't work. It is not in force. So we are quite active because we are negotiating with a certain group of Asian countries. So it's good. And also we, as a European Union, we have like strategic partnerships with Asian countries. Out of 10 existing strategic partnerships, we have 4 with Asian countries. So it is like that. So we are more and more active. And if we go further, what are the results of this potentiality actually of liberalization in trade? So we calculated some data that we gathered. So again, you see what I probably showed you before. So we started with current level of protection. So it's the protection we can measure like tariff burdens, although tariff burdens are not important nowadays. As for European Union, we have less than 4% on average for industrial goods. And actually, the situation where we decrease our burden would be negligible from the point of view of trade development. Then we have the situation where the other group of restrictions are important, and these are rather administrative regulations and technical and quality standards that must be met by products placed on the EU market. So this group of barriers is much more critical, and potentially higher benefits can be obtained from reduction of custom duties in developing countries of Asia, where the tariff barriers amount to several percent. If you look at that table, we can find the countries with like 13, 11, 10, the percentage points of average tariff. So it would have like more significant effect on trade development. Okay, and we can also try to calculate the situation with non-tariff measures. So according to data we gathered, there is a possibility to change the non-tariff measures into tariffs, actually. So we estimated the amount of these technical and non-technical measures applied by European Union to 13 Asian countries in 38 sectors. Actually, the numbers are dependent on data availability. So we found some evidence that that level of protection is quite high in certain group of countries. So we took exports and imports of Asian and European countries, and we recalculated that and compared some sectors that were the most important, and we looked at potential competitors from Asia. And what appeared is that the European Union applies the highest non-technical measures, the highest to Malaysia, India, Pakistan, Taiwan, and China. A little bit lower degree of those non-tariff protection concerns the countries in blue, and the lowest are for Indonesia, Japan, Laos, and Thailand. The second conclusion from this calculation is that the highest non-tariff measures are applied to agricultural origin products. This is probably one of the consequences of our common agricultural policy. Maybe it will change because of the current situation, of course, but yeah, our calculations concerned the period by 2020, actually. So it was the second conclusion from that part. The third is that in relation to all Asian countries, much higher level of protection occurs in the case of technical measures and not non-technical ones, maybe except for Malaysia, which is also done because of extremely high restriction in one group of processed rice products. So it was our finding also. And the final fourth conclusion from that part is that due to the height of non-tariff measures that are clearly higher than tariff restrictions, reduction of or elimination may bring much more significant benefit than reducing custom duties. And this is a table that sum up our calculations. So maybe it's worth of emphasizing that commodity structure of European Union exports to Asia, to Asian countries, is strongly concentrated in medium-skilled and technology-intensive products, also in high-skill and technology-intensive products, and especially in group C7, which comprises machinery and transport equipment. So on the right-hand column, you have competitors in Asia. So it is the situation where for EU countries, the main competitors are in Asia: China, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and Philippines. On the other hand, we have also data for a comparison of Asian specialization in manufactured goods versus EU competitors. Okay. But I saw 30 seconds ago that I have 2 minutes, so yeah, I finish, I guess. So again, we have the situation where we can compete we as a European, we can compete with certain countries from Asia, and in machinery and transport equipment, the most developed countries in Europe can be threatened a little bit, like Germany, France, and Italy. And this also means that there are some possibilities for cooperation, especially in intra-industrial trade. Maybe if we take into account more labor-intensive goods, it's more complicated because certain countries a little bit lower developed in Europe, like Central European countries, can compete with those competitors from Asia, and it can be problematic. I think last 2 slides can be shown here, and this is the third part what we calculated actually and wanted to show. It is that the table shows us that the share of future foreign value add from EU in gross exports, in total foreign value add in selected Asian economies in the years, as you see here. And what we can see that the strongest production ties with the European Union are found in Singapore, China, Japan, South Korea, and Malaysia. Maybe some other countries to a lesser extent. The second conclusion from that part is that after a period of rapid growth of production links from the mid of 90s in 2008 and 2010, the upward trend was reversed, and the third conclusion is that the share of components from EU countries in gross exports of Asia is diversified. So we can find again certain countries that are more important from Asia for the European Union. And yes, some conclusions. So in general, we can observe that from the mid of 90s, European Union's approach of shaping relations with Asia has changed dramatically, I would say, and it was confirmed by the preparation and implementation of new strategy to develop EU relations with Asian region. Initially globally, then it was more individual and flexible, tailored to Asian partners, and negotiations of agreements with individual countries strengthened the regulatory environment that is very much important for connectivity. And finally, this is the last slide. We have 3 conclusions found that due to relatively high level of tariff protection in developing countries of Asia and numerous non-tariff barriers in EU directed toward this group of economies, this implementation of agreements can increase trade, and particularly the import of labor-intensive products to the EU market. And if so, due to this high similarity of export structure in Central and European countries, it may also become a reason for new trade disputes or conflicts. And finally, if we take into account these capital products with high degree of differentiation and technological advancement, the facilitation of foreign direct investment may have greater impact on development of trade. Yes, so thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you. The third presentation will be by Professor Jung Se-won. Yeah, please, within 20 minutes.
Okay, good afternoon. and thank you for inviting me to have a presentation about the connectivity strategy here. I make sure to finish within 20 minutes. It's a time promise. Then I will kind of the giving a very promising issue. Different from the other previous researchers, I would like to approach the connectivity strategy in a different angle. So that is the strategic narratives. So what is the narratives? Then we have some words struck in your mind that could be stories. Stories, why stories can be important. So this constitutes the basics of behavior patterns in social groups or society. That means it forms the knowledge. So they capturing the attitudes and the perceptions and awareness of this project. How do we know well about this project? I think it wouldn't be sufficient to have the 1 day or maybe 3-year project throughout the Monnet network project. So hopefully we can have the more continuation of the such issues. So I approached the connectivity strategy in a different way. So I'm not going to give you the kind of too much introduction. So I'm going to explain about my artwork. So based on connectivity narratives. So then I would like to focus on the 3 different types of the narratives. Then first one is the system narratives. So it's about the structures of the certain issues like the Cold War or war on terror narratives. Then you have heard of the this type of the narrative so many times. And identity narratives, that is setting out the story of the political actor is, then what values it has, what type of the goals they have. And policy initiative narratives, then actually we have the what type of the issues they kind of focus. Then we're going to look at the 5 elements, so that is separated by the semantic networks. So I think this is very unusual methodologies, the kind of new methodologies in the era of the big data. So then I kind of put all the collected texts into the specific software. Then kind of automatically divided by the different type of the word pairs. Then they kind of establish the story of it. So then semantic network analysis is kind of the we can understand that as the word networks. So in the graph, then word means dots. So actually the line means connection. So then I collected the 67 documents from the official homepages of 3 major EU institutions, namely Commission, Council, and Parliament. So I collected the 67 documents. So the European Council have the slightly more documents than the European Commission. So by updating this text version, so I collected up to the end of 2020, so that I need to collect the 1 more year, then we can kind of do more collections. But I think hopefully in the next revision, probably that I will add 1 more year of the collections. So then you know that when the connectivity strategy announced in the September 2018, then started to climb up the number of the whoops. So I made the same mistake of the previous one. So the laser here. So the number of the connectivity documents raised up to the 13 issues. But from 2014 to 17, then you can assume that it's related to the ASEM connectivity. So connectivities within the Asia-Europe meeting context. But after the 2018, all the documents has climbed up to the 25 issues in 2020, the year of COVID-19. Then hopefully we could have the slight increase in 2021. So this is the network I put it, but in the previous meeting, then the reviewer told me that you need to kind of separate down to explain how does artwork looks like. Then it looks very kind of abstract anyway. So kind of the divided by the kind of okay. I can't go to the next slide. So what's happening? Yes. So we're going to look at the 1 by 1. Okay, well, it's really difficult to go back to the backwards. excuse me, could you please help me? It's not moving back and forth. Yeah. Overview, then we're going to look at the each semantic network by the 5 separate pictures. First one is about the scenes, tools, and characteristics, actors, and challenges, and projected endings. So then, first of all, when we're going to look at the characteristics of the actors, then who are major actors? We can have a look. So then we find out some kind of the familiar name like the Jean-Claude Juncker or Donald Tusk or Federica Mogherini, but I think nowadays these names are all changed into the new commission settings, but we can guess that these actors are commission president or council president and high representative or the vice president of the European Commission, so that we can see that these are the representative figures within this EU officials. On the other side, then you can find out the Asian state actors like the China, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Korea-wise, they kind of the North and South Korea are connected, and Japan as well. So then we can say the CJK are the main actors within this the Asian state actors. Then we have the Singapore. Probably then we could guess that it's related to the ASEM connectivities or the digital partnership. There could be that we can have a lame guess. And institutional actors that we can have some parliament or the general secretary general and directors, and also we have the regional actors that in the European side of it, like Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine. But if we have the more documents on the war on Ukraine, that we possibly have the bigger share of the Ukraine related actors. So probably this is kind of the limitation at this stage. Then when we go into the scenes, like the backgrounds of these narratives, then we can have the meetings in terms of the events and the dialogues, like the transport connectivities and issues. And ASEM, then I couldn't kind of connected these two framings of that, but well, ASEM related words were the more kind of the prominent settings within the semantic networks. And the next bottom right hand side of the issues and regional cooperation with the Western Balkans, the words explaining about the scenes. So then usually the connectivities that have the biggest share of the ASEM is kind of the big background connecting in the ASEM region, and the Western Balkan is also another important regions in light of the connectivity. Yes, then when in dealing with the tools and actions, then how to deal with these background, like the strengthening ties. That means these words are related to the kind of the strengthening the relationship with the between Europe and Asia. And when you go down to the bottom one, then strategic partnership. So actually they kind of use the strategic partnership in Asia. They kind of the related wordings connected to the communications and digital economies and rules and policies and elements of the economic systems. And then we can say that the strengthening ties with the ASEAN, that means kind of the emphasizing is ASEAN as the competent partner. Then strengthening strategic partnership, they could be the kind of reliable friends of the European Union. And digital economies and the elements of the economic system is kind of the EU's economic strength and kind of the trade power. And sustainable energy and environment is kind of the implying European Union's energy and environment leadership. Then when we are moving to the challenges we have, so It's not going to, the challenges were not that kind of the significantly visible. Then you need to kind of have the zoom in into the what kind of the challenges we have. Like well, these other challenges was really kind of the abstract for me. But I think three things are kind of quite evident. Then climate change and greenhouse gases, the visible challenges, first of all. And then I think probably Europe want to cooperate with Asia to deal with the climate change or deal with partner. But I think I need to do some more qualitative analysis attached to this to prove this. And COVID-19 pandemic was also another keyword indicating the pandemic-related crisis stories and the challenges. And the next one is peace and security within the Korean Peninsula. Then also when we think about the war in Ukraine, then they will have another word could be attached to that. So I think I agree with the Professor Parks, the kind of the negative Professor Parks, the evaluation about the negative about the connectivity, because it's unclear. But probably I could have a lame guess about that. The outcome or the incentives was not clear. So like the destination for the Europe-Asia connectivity could be achieving sustainable development, or look forward is really kind of somehow as a kind of the reader's perspective is not clear enough. So then I think this is kind of the limitation of that, but vision should be kind of the visible, such as kind of the providing relevant incentives, we could say, like the development aid or money or the more business or more infrastructure cooperation. These words must be there. So then we can find out this vision. So this could be kind of the desired future of the strategic narratives. But what about the fears? But I think this is written by the European Union institutions. So I think we can kind of look into Asian side of it. Then we can kind of find out what could be the fears of the strategy narratives or something. So then I think my recommendation could be, well, otherwise kind of the self-criticism. Then we could kind of look at the Asian side of the perceptions of these strategies, strategic narratives. So in dealing with these narratives, then the system narratives, then EU's economic leadership, they're certainly visible in terms of the digital economy and jobs and growth and young people, internal market and goods and services. And this is solely indicating such leadership, but still kind of the question mark. When you deal with the challenges of the regional security, so this could be enough. So, well, then we can say that these narratives are somehow incomplete. So, well, military actions and naval exchanges and these kind of the things could be the kind of expected storyline. But, well, this story is somehow missing. And what about the identity narratives? How we identify the European Union is that European Union identify as the global economic power and sustainable development and supporter of the global environment standard and also leadership of the global environmental and criteria and regulation, and also what Mira told is the digital leadership as well. So it's what EU is seeking, but still the identity narratives are somehow unclear. So actually these type of the challenges and these identity would not match well with these identities and challenges. And issue type of the things, and the EU is reactive in the issues of advancing normative agendas such as promoting rules of laws and human rights. But somehow these narratives should be talking about one thing, but they are kind of the very dispersed. So actually the kind of the identities are somehow incomplete and system-wise actually not establishing the system well. And then these type of the thing is very much like limited in light of Europe-Asia connectivity. But I think in order to look at these nice combination of these narratives, that we should look at all the document related to the European Union. That we could kind of put the puzzles into one. But somehow my impression about about this kind of the pattern, somehow is the kind of the missing jigsaw puzzle. So actually, this is the what I think. So then. So in terms of the characters, then the China, Korea, China, South Korea, Japan could be the significant partners in this project. And the scenes could be the ASEAN was the primary settings of these narratives. But we have question mark as Asian audiences. Then what about the ASEAN +3 or something? There's still, it's kind of the very question. ASEAN is the association of Southeast Asian nations. So, but ASEAN, the Asia-Europe meeting, then Korea, Japan, and China were the actors within there. Then these primary settings were not kind of connected well. And the challenges, we saw all the issues, but the identity issues were not kind of filling up well with the challenges. And tools and EU's sources and this type of the power sources can be the good responses toward the challenges. So projected ending is somehow we could kind of interpret as incentives, but it's actually still not fulfilling well. So, but I think in my suggestion is kind of based on what I studied through these documents. Then EU capability should be upgraded. So actually, then they need to say explicitly about what kind of the capabilities EU has. So in the light of the connectivity strategies. And the second one, then this type of the vision should be properly highlighted. Then what could be the participants' expected outcomes or incentives when we participate in the Europe-Asia connectivity or maybe Indo-Pacific strategies? Then we need to see the vision. So partners should be kind of persuaded from what they wanted. So that is kind of the give and take issues. So then third point, then EU could reconsider establishing proper strategic narratives. So we are some missing puzzles, then we need to put more puzzles and kind of showing the whole picture to the potential partners. So I think the EU has power and capability, but still they need to kind of build up the more proper strategic narratives. And then EU could hear more voices from the other international actors, probably the global actors. What could be what could they expect, or will perceive or respond, or like-mindedness, what Anna told in the morning session. So then we could kind of measure this type of things by asking some questions or something. Then also how experts recognize well about this initiative. So I think that this is another critical question we should throw. Then the last suggestion could be the EU could find more chances to enhance cooperations. Like we need to have a proper stage for the corporations, like not only United Nations, G7 or G20, but they need to have the more how can we say, the initiatives that directed to the strengthening the networks. So like the strategic partnership, security partnership, etc., and digital partnership as well. Recently, the EU is kind of having the digital partnership with Singapore, Japan, and South Korea, and I think this will be kind of expected to expand more. Okay, well, that's all I have. I think less than 1 minute and 45 seconds, so I did the nice timekeeping, and thank you very much for your attention.
Okay. Okay, thank you for saving 1 minute. And the presentation was clear and much easier to follow than the draft itself. Okay, now the last speaker is the Dr. Young-Wook Chang. So you can spend 20 minutes, 21 minutes.
Okay, hi, this is Young Chang from the KIAP, and thanks for having me here. I'm sorry that I came late today because of the flight schedule, and I missed the first and second. Missed the first and beginning of the second session, and I thought I felt sorry because if I learn the concepts that were discussed in the first and second session before the presentation, my presentation would have been much better, because I'm relatively new to this topic, and I kind of investigated the similarity and difference between AIIB and EIB, and I added some of my opinion at the end of the presentation about the cooperation between these two institutions from the perspectives of connectivity. But since my background is mostly economics, and I don't have much understanding about the connectivity itself before I prepare this presentation. So actually this conference is a good opportunity to develop or enhance my understanding, and I think this will helpful for me to develop more about this paper. Anyway, this one is about my previous investigation, and I will review the aim, organization, and funding of the AIIB and EIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and European Investment Bank, and introduce their key projects. And then I will discuss some areas, some current and potential areas of cooperation between these two institutions from the perspective of connectivity. All right, so these two institutions are focusing on building infrastructure, and infrastructure is key to regional economic development and integration. So infrastructure here includes physical, digital, commercial, medical, educational, and social infrastructure. So all sorts of infrastructure should be crucial for regional integration and probably for connectivity or enhancing connectivity. But the financing capacity of individual governments is often insufficient for building large-scale infrastructure. So the operation of multilateral financial institutions beyond the individual government is essential for this construction of infrastructure. And Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and European Investment Bank are established for the very purpose of this building infrastructure and filling the financial gap. So the AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, was established in January 2016 with 57 founding members, but it was generally led by China and Xi Jinping. It's compared with Asian Development Bank is, I think, is closest rival. Asian Development Bank opened with 31 members in 1966, and the founding members were much more. Founding members of the AIIB was much more than ADB, and it grows a lot faster. So now over 100 regional and non-regional members belong to the AIIB, compared to 68 members of ADB. So, and the population of all the member countries comprises of 79% of global population and 60% of global GDP. And China has the biggest sharing voting power, 25%, followed by India around 8% and Russia around 6%. And non-regional members outside Asia hold nearly 25% of the shareholding. So the AIIB membership includes Canada, Australia, UK, France, Spain, etc. But the United States and Japan were excluded. United States and Japan are the biggest shareholders of Asian Development Bank, but were excluded from AIIB. And it's mostly because of geopolitics between China and US. And it's also related to the aim of the foundation of the AIIB. AIIB officially was established to foster sustainable economic development, create wealth, and improve infrastructure connectivity in Asia by investing in infrastructure and other productivity sectors. And it's established to fund the BRI, Belt and Road Initiatives. But European Parliament Research Service analyzed that it is the establishment of the AIIB has some background aim, including these four. So it was established because it wants to fill the investment gap in Asia. And AIIB's creation is explicitly linked to the launch of Belt and Road Initiative of China. And China led the establishment of BRI and AIIB at the same time. And it also was created to respond to the reluctance of advanced economies to increase China's voting rights in Western-dominated multilateral financial institutions, including World Bank and Asian Development Bank. And third, it aims to portray China as a responsible great power capable of providing public goods in its region and beyond. So China, I mean, it's not the explicit goal of the creation of the AIIB, but China intends to, increase its political and economic influence over the countries in those regions and beyond. And it also allows China to make better use of its massive foreign exchange reserves. Organization. So the organization of AIIB is following the traditional governance of other multilateral financial institutions. So it has a board of governors and a board of directors and a top management headed by a president and 5 vice presidents. Even though it follows the traditional governance structure of other multilateral financial institutions, it wants to overcome the red tape inefficiency and overstaffing. And AIB adopted non-resident and non-paid director system, similar to the system of EIB. And then EIB. So EIB was the European Investment Bank was created much earlier than the AIIB. It was created in 1957 to support Europe's post-war recovery, Europe's post-war recovery and reconstruction. It shares the same basis with the European Economic Community. There's this Article 149, 150, I guess, of Treaty of Rome was related to the creation of the EIB. And the explicit aim of the EIB was provision of financing in the form of loans for Europe's major infrastructure projects. And it was aiming the smooth and balanced creation of a common market in the EEC. And it also wants to narrow the gap between stronger and weaker economies within Europe and European community. The EIB's organization is more or less same as the AIIB. It has a board of governors, board of directors, and and management committees. And it also has an audit committee. The projects. AIIB and EIB have projects related to green infrastructure and post-pandemic recovery. So for the AIIB, there are 4 pillars of key projects. The first one is green infrastructure. Second one is connectivity and regional cooperation. Third one is technology-enabled infrastructure. And fourth is private capital mobilization. I would like to focus on the green infrastructure because this sustainability issues that were discussed before was also the key focus of AIIB's funding and financing. So I think I wrote it in the paper, and many of the recent projects funded by the AIIB is related to energy and sustainable infrastructure. And by the end of 2020, the AIIB has approved 108 projects, which amount to $22 billion US. And I think I wrote the number here, but most of these go to energy and green infrastructure. And the share of green infrastructure, or share of the projects related to green infrastructure, is increasing. Yeah, here. There are some examples of AIIB projects related to green transportation and green infrastructure. So there is a transmission grid in Bangladesh, which aims to improve the reliability and efficiency of power transmission in Dhaka and the Western Zone. And also it funded the projects for the first and largest utility-scale solar project in Oman. It also helps the government of Maldives develop a sustainable regional solid waste treatment system in Great Mali. And it also works with World Bank on water and sanitation projects in Bangladesh. It also helps the government of Uzbekistan provide Bukhara region with access to safely managed water and sanitation. So these are the projects funded by the AIIB in 2020, and most of the recent projects were related to green infrastructure. And I think I didn't write in the PPT slides, but the most recent projects were also related to post-pandemic recovery. So including vaccine, including the provision of medicines and medical equipment or something like that. So it's also related to vaccine diplomacy, where China wants to increase its influence over the region using this pandemic situation. And the EIB, so recent activities of the EIB also focus on climate and environment. It also has other priority areas like development, innovation and skills, small businesses, infrastructure and cohesion. And from 2020, since the beginning of the pandemic, EIB also put its effort for COVID-19 responses, including vaccination support for Africa and preparation for the next pandemic. And I think the EIB and AIIB shares same goal on this area, despite the difference in its intention. And the AIB approved projects worth 55.8 billion euros in 2021, and around 92% was went for the project proposed by the member of the EU. So similarity, I think the EIB and AIIB have some similarities in terms of the characteristics of projects that they fund. Both focus on sustainable and resilient infrastructure to connect Asia and Europe to the world. And it has explicit interest in climate change and post-pandemic recovery. But the thing is, there is some difference in implicit intention and the level of requirement for transparency, accountability, and inclusion. I think this can be a potential threat to Asia-Europe cooperation. And this connectivity might be, so the AIB and EIB work separately to enhance connectivity of China or Asia and Europe to the world, but not connectivity between China or Asia and Europe. So there's a lot to address to make these two institutions work for Asia-Europe cooperation. But since they have shared intention on the building of green infrastructure, I think it's still, these two still there are some areas that these two institutions can work together. So the AIB prioritize green infrastructure investments and deliver local environment improvements and promote climate action. So they, as I show you, they keep investment in renewable energy, low carbon public transportation, water management and sanitation, pollution control, ecosystem services. And this is the shared goal of the EIB as well. It's also supposed projects to cleaner transport, digital networks, energy efficiency, and sustainable urban development. And these are the areas that these two institutions can work with. And there was actually the movement that these two explicitly expressed their interest in cooperation. So in May 2016, both signed on the Memorandum of Understanding ensuring cooperation between the two parties. They agreed to broaden cooperation to support investment in strategically important projects, seeking jointly financed projects and increase cooperation in countries where both institutions are active. So many of the European countries are the member of AIIB as well. So there are quite a few areas and reasons that these two institutions can work. Also, the AIIB has experiences of co-financing key projects with other multilateral financial institutions. So it worked with World Bank. It signed an agreement outlining the co-financing parameters of their investment projects. It announced that sizable share of $1.2 billion worth AIB projects would be jointly financed, and they worked together since. It also co-financed projects with Asian development banks. So they co-financed an investment project in the construction of these transportation infrastructure. And it also has experience of cooperating with European Bank of Reconstruction and Development. It co-financed the project to construct a highway connecting to Shanbei, Tajikistan, to the border of Uzbekistan. So there's no reason that this AIIB cannot work with EIB as well, since this AIIB has experiences of cooperating with other institutions. Yes, and the area of potential cooperation could be this co-financing of the projects explicitly enhancing Asia-Europe connectivity. So BRI itself, I guess, is the large-scale transportation infrastructure, and it has explicit goal to connect Asian regions to western side of the world. So it can be, I mean, these two institutions can work together to finance the projects related to the BRI itself, and also they can work together to invest in projects of projects aiming to achieve climate neutrality and also post-pandemic recovery. So as I said, the level of transparency, human rights consideration, and respect on democratic procedure, etc., could differ between Europe and Asia. Actually, when China established the AIIB, they said they wouldn't incorporate some political conditionality on the funding of projects, unlike what the European institutions do. So this is the difference between the China-led MFIs and other MFI. But still, since they have the shared goal, they can work together. That's what I thought. And also, AIIB could be an external leverage for domestic reforms. And this, one of the aims of creation of AIIB was to leverage the domestic reforms, meeting the standard, global standard of other institutions or accountability. So if the AIIB were to become an external leverage for domestic reforms, then EIB can, cooperate with the AIIB. All right, that's it for my presentation. Thanks for listening, and I would appreciate any comments and insight for my presentation. Thank you. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you. Thank you for keeping exactly on time. So now, finally, I'd like to invite the discussant, Professor Hee-Yul Chai. You can have the 50 minutes.
Okay, good afternoon. I was really delighted when Professor Song Bak asked me to join this conference as a discussant, but I was shocked knowing that there are 4 papers to discuss. 4 papers deal with different subject and belong to different field of study. As an economist specialized in finance, I'm not familiar with these papers. Anyway, I try to understand the papers, and I try to make comments. And given time constraint, I will raise just one question on each paper. Okay, this is the contents of my comments. 4 papers dealing with different subjects. And after giving my comments and asking a question, I'll briefly mention the EU-Asia connectivity of regional financial safety nets, which is not covered in this present conference. So first paper written by Professor Lee. Professor Lee presented much more fruitful, gave a fruitful presentation, but I focus on the issue raised in the preceding paper sent to me. In this paper, he raises the issue arising from the low carbon transition in the EU, and 3 Northeast Asian countries, Korea, Japan, and China. And this paper examines the possibility of cooperation as well as trade conflict. I think the 3 countries in East Asia don't share the same vision and policy stance on decarbonization issues. In China, the low carbon coalition is still a long way to go compared to Korea and Japan. In view of Chinese fierce criticism of European decarbonization measures, including the carbon border adjustment mechanism, it seems difficult to expect close cooperation on environmental issues between the 3 East Asian countries. To put differently, using the terms raised this morning, I don't think the 3 East Asian countries are not like-minded. So I'd like to ask whether the EU-East Asian connectivity is itself a meaningful concept in this context. Next paper written by Professor Pascal Biak and Professor Bia Luas. Their paper deals with the connectivity of trade and investment. It analyzes the main factors of trade benefits and identifies which country gains the benefits most from trade liberalization between the EU and Asia. I think it is an interesting paper with extensive statistical evidence, potentially showing several important aspects of EU-Asia trade connectivity. I also like that it emphasizes that the EU changed the original strategy and prefers a more flexible approach, individually tailored to Asian partners. The paper is built upon 2 central hypotheses.
first hypothesis is the possibilities of gaining benefits from the liberalization of trade between the EU and Asia depend on the degree of current protection, etc. And second hypothesis is that trade liberalization's most significant benefits can potentially be obtained by countries where the current level of protection is the highest, where the similarity of export structures is the lowest, etc. Based on those hypotheses, the paper shows important empirical facts about which country gains the benefits most from trade liberalization between the EU and Asia. But I think that the hypotheses are just postulated instead of being verified or demonstrated. So I'd like to hear from the authors if they have any idea of verifying the hypothesis to complete the storyline. Professor Chung and Professor Yu's paper uses semantic network analysis to analyze the strategic narratives appearing in EU institutions' official documents about Europe-Asia connectivity. It asserts that the EU needs to emphasize more the projected endings of its connectivity strategy and ensure the vision of the Europe-Asia connectivity with other partners. In my view, for specific connectivity issues such as energy, trade, infrastructure, or digital economy, the EU's visions are clearly suggested. But the paper maintains, based on semantic network analysis, that the EU does not suggest its visions of the strategy, so it might not be convincing to the EU's potential partners. Please explain why the assessments differ. My question can be formulated differently. What are the strengths and weaknesses of semantic network analysis as an analysis method? Dr. Zhang's paper deals with the connectivity of infrastructure investment. It compares two international financial institutions, AIIB and EIB, focusing on their role and tries to suggest cooperation strategies between them. I think their apparent goals are similar, but the true goals are different. EIB's goal is European connectivity or solidarity, while AIIB's goal is China's regional and global expansion. On the other hand, it seems that the cooperation strategy between AIIB and EIB assumes China as the main representative of Asian countries. China is, of course, an important one, but not the representative. As an argument for the cooperation of the two banks, the paper mentions the AIIB has experienced co-financing with the ADB and EBRD. Then, why wouldn't it be more appropriate to formulate the cooperation between ADB and EBRD for deepening EU-Asia connectivity and infrastructure investment? I'd love to hear the author's view on this point. Let me now briefly mention the connectivity of regional financial safety nets. In the Eurozone area, the regional financial arrangement is ESM, European Stability Mechanism, which is established in 2012. Its mission is to avoid or overcome the financial crisis in member states of the Eurozone by providing financial assistance to those in financial distress. In Asia, the counterparty is CMIM, Chiang Mai Initiative Multilateral, AMRO, Asian Macroeconomic Research Office. CMIM's mission is the same as the ESM, but its status is not the same, as ESM. ESM is an international organization. It is a legal entity with paid-in capital. CMIM is not an international organization. It is a multilateral swap arrangement. AMRO is the macroeconomic surveillance unit of CMIM. AMRO is an international organization. There are several layers of conceivable collaborations. Basically, cooperation at the technical level, such as surveillance methods, lending toolkits, and internal management can be considered. Such cooperation is already underway to some extent now. Deeper cooperation needs the transformation of CMIM into a legal entity by subscription of paid-in capital. After doing this, various cooperation measures can be considered. For example, cross-shareholdings between the two institutions and bilateral lending programs can be considered. On the other hand, one institution can help another institution to issue bonds and find investors in its region. One institution can provide guarantees for bonds issued by another institution. All these collaborations will enhance their overall funding capability and contribute to avoiding or overcoming the financial crisis in the two regions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for the wonderful discussion and for saving times. I'd like to invite all the speakers and discussants to the front. Well, thanks to the cooperation, all the speakers, and especially the discussant, Professor Chai. Now we can have enough time for the additional discussions. So, before inviting speakers to respond to the comments by Professor Chai, I'd like to collect a few comments or questions from the floor. So, if you have any comment or question, please. Okay, Professor Park Sung-hoon.
One very small question goes to Dr. Zhang. When you mentioned about the membership of AIIB, you said that US and Japan are excluded from the AIIB membership. I think it is quite different, between being excluded and having not applied for membership, right? So, as far as I know, in the case of US and Japan, they did not want to be part, or do you have any other information about that?
Okay. So other comments or questions? Then otherwise I should enforce someone to President Hung Jong-kim. Oh, okay. Sorry. The Julie.
You have a very positive view, and I think we need a much closer engagement with a critical interpretation of what green investment looks like, what infrastructure designed to save the planet and work on climate change actually results in, not least in the cost to that green economy of producing some of this stuff in the first place. So I guess what I'm saying is, your point about the differences between human rights, labor rights, the fundamental differences, you somewhat skipped over. That you said this could show a difference. I would have flipped it around and said there are really fundamental differences here which will prevent that meaningful engagement and that meaningful realization with those very projects that you show. And may I ask a secondary question? Is that okay, to Professor Saiwon Chung? I really like content and network analysis. I'm very, I find it very useful, and but there are methodological questions around. It will only give you parameters based on the data that you put in. And I find that when we're looking at things, language is used in multiple ways. There's two questions. One is the difficulty of working on looking at agreements that have been mediated through translation, that tend to resort to official language, which again tends to resort to EU or UN language. So there's a very particular methodological issue around the language that is chosen by those states in the first place. And secondarily, when we look at questions of organization and behavior, to what extent do you reflect on the potential methodological flaws of the very words that you choose to analyze in the first place? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'd like to ask you to provide any question or comment to the first two papers. Okay.
Yes, so thank you. I was going to ask Professor Lee a question, and I enjoyed your presentation, a nice overview of some of the challenges that we're facing in terms of energy. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on terms of policy prescriptions from these challenges and how one can find projects or investments that the EU and Asian partners could perhaps make to ensure an energy transition that is adaptive rather than maladaptive. Because I mean, I see the current crises going in two directions. So one, people are using it as a justification for a green transition, but also people are using it to justify further investments in fossil fuels, and that's perhaps not the right thing to do from a climate perspective. I also thought that it was very useful that you mentioned the rare earth metals, and the green metal challenge is a big one. So, I mean, does Korea have any plans? Do you think of anything that Korea and the EU could do together to ensure a diversity of supply? Because a lot of people point out we probably don't want to exchange one type of dependency on over-reliance on like Russian fossil fuel with an over-reliance on Chinese green metals, which could also be problematic down the road. And we know that some years back that they used rare earth metals as a bargaining chip. So one could definitely envision them doing that again in the future. Okay, I'll stop there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone to Professor Paziobiak? No? Actually, the most questions clarified the respondents, except one. Professor Chai provided specific questions to each paper, but the last one, the additional kind of discussion related with the regional safety net, Professor Chai didn't assign any speaker to answer the question. So I'd like to ask the Professor Paziobiak to provide kind of a brief response to that discussion. Okay, then Professor Lee, please. I think each speaker can spend around 3 minutes.
Okay, thanks for the question and comments. And yeah, I appreciate both Professor Che and the second question also. Well, the green agenda has peculiarities for the cooperation agenda. Well, at least as long as it represents the public goods, then it does have still have more common element, common denominator than other subject, other economic subject. So that, well, in that sense, well, compared to other economic and security subject, it is easy to get started. Maybe the threshold to bring the issue on the table might be lower. So yes, well, there are some low-hanging fruit, but sometimes I do wonder, especially when I think about connectivity. Basically, two things. One is it fair to bring China? Is more fundamentalist. Well, have China and dealing with China and also dealing with other Asian countries will be in the same kind of flow, same category, or is it somewhat different? Because connectivity, whether the EU has argued or not, connectivity has been received by the Chinese part as a kind of pressure regime or containment regime. So the China and other Asian countries might have different perspectives. So that goes to Professor Che's comment, because yes, certainly same vision. I do not think so. So, and well, as long as principle and direction concerned, yes, the same direction, same principle. But certainly there are too many details, time, scope, implementation measure, compliance mechanism. They are all quite different. Korea and Japan in the eye, from the European side, may have more commonality to deal with. China is different, and other ASEAN countries are different. So going back to the second question, if we really want to, from the European side, if the green agenda will be discussed, then I would categorize Korea, Japan, and maybe Singapore in one category, and the ASEAN countries in the second category. And I may treat China in a different way. So yes, at some point we have to recognize that connectivity is not just about all the cooperation, or most of the agenda, digital, energy, green, well, all those issues have conflictual elements, and we have to admit it. But even though there might be a number of conflictual agenda ranging from fossil fuel, nuclear, LNG, and climate change issues, but still there are some project to work on. So do not target the high-hanging fruit from the beginning, but at the earlier stage, finding out some sort of low-hanging fruit, and then we can move up higher, as long as connectivity project is not just short-term project. It's kind of a long-term partnership agenda between the EU and Asian countries. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Now, Professor Pazio Biak.
Thank you very much for your comments and questions too. Yeah, probably we could put our statements more clearly and more directly in conclusion part, and these maybe were not explicitly stated. So actually we were searching for like confirmation of this hypothesis, and what we got was that situation is divided or is a little bit complex. We found that two groups of countries and two groups of products that were and are actually present in the trade between an investment between Asia and Europe, and one is the Asian group of developing countries with advantage in lower and middle technology products, and if we take into account the level of protection, it means that if we lower non-tariff measures, it will cause some benefits for this group of countries, Asian countries. And for more developed European countries, the situation will be rather treated as a threat, and that may be also causing some disputes, trade conflicts with the group of countries that joined the European Union in 2004. This group are this middle developed group of countries. On the other hand, we have these developed countries where, if we look at those assumptions and this hypothesis, the degree of current trade protection and similarities in export structures and the degree of integration, here we have a situation where the benefits can be mutual. So this is kind of visible in intra-industry trade, where if we implement investment and if we can lower tariff barriers, this could cause some benefits from intra-industry trade, and it would help to develop trade in general. So probably we should put it in a more direct way in the conclusion part, and I think this could be my answer to the question from our referee. And I was supposed to talk a little bit about financial net in Asia, right? As far as I understood. Actually, I'm not a specialist in that, but maybe to some, I find some connection between connectivity between Europe and Asia, financial issues, and I think it would be advisable to combine these possibilities of financing, for example, infrastructure in Asia by European capital too. So this would cause some mutual benefits from both sides, because, as I mentioned today, even that the cost of infrastructure is immense, so each source is important, and this would also cause some possibilities for European enterprise, first financially be involved in these activities, but on the other hand, also it would help to create a real infrastructure for development of economic ties. Okay. So, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you for the answer. Well, if you'd like, you can add some comment. Okay. Okay. No. Professor Chung.
Okay, thank you very much for your thoughtful comments and questions. And I'm really kind of I'm not that competent that I can answer in 3 minutes. So if I try to finish within 3 minutes, after that we can kind of have more talks afterwards. Well, thank you very much for first of all, Professor Hee-Yu Chai, of your thoughtful comments on the issues. And I think I rethought about the vision from the European Union, and trade outcomes or energy corporations or digital corporation could be interpreted as the incentives. But within my data, then just only said the trade and energy and digital, and that aspect is really difficult to interpret for me as the vision of the European Union. So rather I understood what could be the destination of the Europe-Asia connectivity could be for me, as I understood that as the 2030 development, and the SDG is the most visible things. So if we have the trade outcomes or trade incentives, then can be another vision. So when I update that, I will think carefully according to your comments and try to dig into more carefully. And also in terms of the social semantic network analysis is kind of the putting whole text into the specific analytic software to separate into the words into the by pairing. So by pairing, they kind of providing the networks, then they kind of showing the pattern. So then by reading all 67 documents in kind of the one picture, but we need the lots of the data processing issues. But I think then in terms of the recognize the whole pattern in one picture, so I think that could be the strength of the this methodology. But unfortunately, the weakness wise, actually, when you go into deep down into these framings, then this information cannot properly provide the substantive and in-depth analysis. So in order to explain this, then we need to have the more data or more thoughtful qualitative analysis attached to this framing specifically. So that could be kind of still, I would say, it's a weakness or the limitation of this methodology. So this is not kind of the magic bullet or something, but we have some weaknesses, then kind of putting more data into it. And okay, thank you. Then I can, I'm sure that I could do the Julie. And Julie's, to throw the two questions about the linguistic diversity and also the difference between the organizations, commission, council, and parliament and things. And I think we all understand that the most of the EU documents are usually written in English. But after the Brexit, it seems like the French portion has been increasing. But thanks to the Google translation, so then we can kind of having this kind of the macro methodologies can lead up to the interpretation into English. So then I really kind of benefited in case of the Russian or other second language things, and using Google Translator to kind of put the semantic network into English translation. So hopefully this type of the macro level that could be possible, but in terms of in-depth or the qualitative analysis, that I could need some collaborators in terms of that, so to overcome the linguistic diversity. And the organization behaviors and differences that you gave me another insight of the doing second paper, so can separate into the commission, council, and parliament how these institutions show the attitudes regarding the EU-Asia connectivity initiative. Yeah, well, I think we could have more chat because of due to the limited time. Then excuse me about that.
Thanks for all the comments and questions. I'd like to address the question of Professor Park because it's just a clarification question. You are right that US and Japan did not want to join the AIIB. They were not excluded. I think I used a strong word. But exclusion is actually the word that I was pondering on, because connectivity between us can mean exclusion of others. So all the regional cooperation and regional trade bloc and all the discussion about the this connectivity could be seen as exclusion of other trade bloc or other regional cooperation. So for example, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework it can be seen as the some tool that excludes China, even though China did not want to. It was China who did not intend to join IPEF, but that was my thought. So Japan and US did not want to join the AIIB, but it could be China or other membership countries' intention to exclude US and Japan in their framework. That's what I thought, but you are right that this was US and Japan who did not want to join. And Professor Chai's comments, thanks. It's true that China, the true goals of AIIB and EIB are different, even though they share the official goal. So there should be much careful consideration of the different conditions and intentions of these two institutions, that's for sure. But what I thought is, despite the Chinese intention of intention to increase in their political and economic influence, they at least explicitly say that they are interested in enhancing connectivity between Asia and the world, and they also are interested in building of green infrastructure and sustainable infrastructure. So what I thought is that we can use this explicit goal to actually enhance enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of building sustainable infrastructure. And I thought about the way to utilize this explicit intention. As to the Julie's comments related to that, I thank.
Just 30 seconds.
Yeah. Thanks for your comments, and I agree that I need to dig deeper into the official documents of them and what's really impeding the engagement between these two parties. But what I thought, again, is that there is this explicit movement of memorandum of understanding between these two parties in 2016, and there is examples of cooperation between AIIB and other multilateral financial institutions, including EBRD. So I thought there is some areas that we could start from, even though there is fundamental difference between these two parties. But I agree that I need to look into it more in depth, and I will do that later. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think still we have so many things to discuss, and we eagerly want to discuss further. But usually the main role of the moderator is the work of the time management. So I tried to finish this session exactly on time, but spent 4 more minutes. Sorry about that. And I'm also sorry for my enforcement of the time limit to each speaker and to the discussant. But thanks for their cooperation. I think we can relatively well manage the planned schedule. Okay, let's finish the session with big applause to the speakers and the discussant. Okay, thank you.